The notification hit my phone at 6:17 a.m., shattering the pre-dawn silence of my cramped apartment. I am Kara Ford, and I thought I was waking up to a weather alert. Instead, I woke up to a $13,400 charge for a luxury vacation I wasn't invited to. For 30 years, I had been the invisible foundation of my family, paying the mortgage on a house I wasn't allowed to live in while they drained me dry. But as I stared at the glowing screen, the numbness of a lifetime of sacrifice finally cracked. They thought they were taking a trip. They didn't realize they were handing me the match to burn their entitlement to the ground. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. My phone buzzed at 6:17 a.m. I remember the exact minute because the room was still pitch black, the only light coming from the aggressive blue glow of the screen on my nightstand. I reached for it with a heavy, sleep-deprived hand, assuming it was a weather alert, or maybe an early email from the job site about a concrete pour. I was used to waking up to problems. As a project coordinator for a commercial construction firm, my life was a series of putting out fires. But as my eyes adjusted to the glare, I realized this wasn't a work crisis. It was the moment my parents finally ambushed my life in a way I couldn't come back from. The notification was from my banking app flagging a transaction for unusual activity. I sat up the duvet, falling away as a cold knot tightened in my stomach. The amount was staggering $13,400. My first thought was identity theft. Someone had skimmed my card at a gas station. But then I read the merchant details, the Saguaro's Ridge Resort and Spa. I clicked deeper into the transaction pending on my credit card. It wasn't just a hotel stay. It was a VIP Desert Oasis package, complete with 3 first-class round-trip tickets to Phoenix private mud bath add-ons and a week-long rental of a luxury casita. This wasn't an emergency. This was a robbery. I didn't wait to wash my face or make coffee. I dialed my mother, Linda Ford, my thumb hitting the screen so hard I thought the glass might crack. She picked up on the third ring, her voice bright and airy, completely at odds with the panic hammering in my chest. "Kara, you're up early. Did you get the notification? Dad and I were up half the night sorting out the itinerary?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "You booked it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom, there is a $13,000 charge on my card. That's my entire credit limit. That's more than I have in savings." "Oh, stop being so dramatic." She laughed, a dismissive sound I had heard my entire life. "It's an investment in family wellness. You know how stressed Tessa has been lately with her auditions not working out. She needs a reset. And honestly, Kara, you barely travel anyway. The points were just sitting there rotting. It's bad for your credit score not to use the card." I heard my father, Mark, booming in the background, his voice muffled but unmistakable. "Tell her we're family. What's hers is ours. She needs to stop hoarding everything." The reality of the itinerary hit me. 3 tickets. Mom, Dad, Tessa. I'm not even invited, I said, the realization landing like a physical blow. "You stole 13 grand from me to take Tessa on a luxury vacation." "Stole is such an ugly word," Linda snapped, her tone shifting from breezy to venomous in a heartbeat. "We are your parents. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. This card is basically the family card. We're doing this for us, for the family unit. Why are you so selfish?" I sat there in my cramped, overpriced apartment, staring at the peeling paint on the windowsill. The irony was suffocating. I was 30 years old, living in a rental that smelled like damp carpet, while my parents and my younger sister lived in the 3-bedroom bungalow I owned. I paid the mortgage. I paid the property taxes. I paid for the new roof when the old one leaked last winter. They paid nothing. I had bought that house at 26, proud to have secured a piece of the American dream, only for my father's business to fail again. They asked to stay for 6 months. That was 4 years ago. Slowly, they had pushed me out, filling the garage with their junk, turning my office into a lounge for Tessa, until I moved out just to have room to breathe. My life had been a long, slow erasure. In high school, I worked nights at a diner, while Tessa got a brand new car because she was too fragile to take the bus. In college, I turned down a study abroad program in London to send money home only to find out later they used it to redecorate the living room. I was the responsible one, the background character, the wallet. Tessa was the main character, the golden child who needed to be protected from the harsh realities of the world, realities I absorbed for her. "I'm not being selfish," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I was shaking. "I'm paying for the house you live in rent-free. I pay your cell phone bills. I can't afford this, Mom. After everything we've sacrificed for you?" Linda's voice rose to a shriek, playing her favorite card. "You'd have nothing without us. You exist because of our sacrifices. Don't you dare threaten us over a vacation. You owe us this." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap like a bone breaking. It was quiet like a lock clicking into place. I realized then that this wasn't about money. If I paid this off next month, it would be a car for Tessa or a renovation for their kitchen. They were trying to erase me completely, turning me into a ghost that only existed to sign checks. The hot rage that had been building in my throat suddenly cooled into an eerie, frozen calm. I looked at the time. 6:22 a.m. The world outside was starting to wake up, and for the first time in years I felt awake too. "You're right," I said into the phone. My voice sounded different, flat, metallic. "Family should support each other. I'm sorry I overreacted." Linda let out a triumphant sigh. "I knew you'd see reason, sweetheart. We're going to have such a wonderful time. We'll send pictures." "Please do," I said. "I hope you have the best trip of your lives." I hung up the phone and set it gently back on the nightstand. I meant it. I wanted them to have the best trip of their lives because I knew what was waiting for them when they got back. And for the first time in my life, I meant it in a way she would not understand yet. I didn't go to work that day. For the first time in 7 years, I called my boss and lied, my voice steady, as I claimed a migraine. In a way, it wasn't a lie. The pressure behind my eyes felt like a storm front moving in. I sat at my tiny chipped laminate kitchen table, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. On the screen of my laptop, the banking statement glowed, a digital testament to my betrayal. Next to it, I placed an old physical photograph I kept in a shoebox, my parents and me at a park back when I was 5. They looked kind in the photo. They looked like people who would protect me. I didn't feel the hot, screaming rage I expected. Instead, a numbness settled over me, a cold, clinical clarity that allowed me to look at my life without the soft focus of filial duty. I had grown up in the kind of American small town where family was a religion. We went to church on Sundays, neighbors baked pies for new arrivals, and the highest social currency was the appearance of a close-knit, loving home. To the outside world, the Fords were saints who had weathered bad luck. To me, they were a vacuum that had slowly sucked the life out of my future. As I sat there, the memories I had suppressed for years began to align like evidence in a criminal case. I remembered high school, coming home with a report card of straight A's and an acceptance into the National Honor Society. My parents had barely looked up from the TV. Yet 10 minutes later, when Tessa walked in with a participation ribbon for her junior varsity cheerleading squad, my mother had wept with joy and ordered pizza to celebrate. "She needs the boost," Kara, my father, had said when he saw my face. "Don't be jealous. It's ugly." Then college. I worked nights stocking shelves at a grocery store to pay my tuition, exhausting myself to stay debt-free. Meanwhile, my parents took out Parent Plus loans they couldn't afford to send Tessa to a private liberal arts college she flunked out of after 3 semesters. They told me it was because Tessa has a different kind of potential. She belongs in that world. But the house, that was the sharpest knife. I closed my eyes and replayed the day I bought the bungalow. It was modest, just 3 bedrooms and a small yard, but I had planted a dogwood tree in the front and painted the shutters navy blue. It was mine, the American dream. A year later, Dad's investment in a friend's restaurant went belly up. Mark cried at my kitchen table, shoulders shaking, talking about losing everything. Just 6 months they had promised. just until we get back on our feet. 6 months turned into a year, then 2, then 4. My furniture was slowly shoved into the garage to make room for their overstuffed recliners. When I finally moved into this cramped apartment to give us all some space, they immediately turned my old bedroom into a walk-in closet for Tessa. The memory that stung the most was a barbecue last July. I was in the kitchen prepping the potato salad when I heard my father talking to a neighbor on the back deck. "We love this house," he'd said, gesturing to the yard I paid for. "It's our little sanctuary. Kara is such a help with the maintenance, bless her heart." He spoke of me like I was a hired hand, a background character in the story of his success. I needed to see it one last time. I drove over to the bungalow around noon, knowing they were out shopping for their trip. I let myself in with my key, telling myself I needed to check on a leaky sink in the master bath. The house smelled like my mother's perfume, sickly sweet and overpowering. I walked through the living room and the erasure was total. My taste, my colors, my presence had been scrubbed away. The walls were covered in a shrine to the family narrative I wasn't part of. There were photos of Tessa at dance recitals, Tessa at graduation, Mom and Dad on trips that I had unknowingly funded. I scanned the gallery wall, desperate for proof of my own existence. I found exactly one picture of me. It was a group shot from a cousin's wedding, and I was on the far edge, half cropped out of the frame, my face slightly blurred. In my own home, my parents had managed to erase me almost completely. I left the house and drove straight to a coffee shop where I opened my laptop and typed a single question into Google: "What happens if my family uses my credit card without permission?" That search led me to a phone call with the credit card company's fraud department, and then a consult with a local real estate attorney. The attorney, a sharp-voiced woman named Ms. Halloway, listened to my story without interrupting. "If the card is solely in your name and you didn't authorize the charge, it is fraud, plain and simple," she said. "As for the house whose name is on the deed, mine." I said, "Only mine." "Do they have a lease?" "No." "Then they are tenants at will," she explained. "You hold all the cards, Kara. They have been bluffing you with guilt, but legally, they have nothing." The power balance shifted in my head with a tectonic groan. For years, they had threatened to cut me off emotionally, to exclude me from the family. But the truth was, they needed me to survive. I didn't need them. I thanked her and hung up. The coldness in my chest solidified into a plan. I picked up my phone and sent a text to my mother. "Hey, I'll swing by tomorrow with someone to look at that water heater you complained about." She replied instantly with a thumbs-up emoji. She had no idea that the someone I was bringing was a real estate agent. The next morning, I pulled into the driveway with Mr. Chang, a sharp-eyed realtor I'd introduced to my parents simply as a contractor friend, helping me look at some maintenance issues. The house was buzzing with chaotic energy. Suitcases were exploded open in the living room, filled with resort wear that still bore the price tags I had effectively paid for. My parents and Tessa were practically vibrating with excitement, oblivious to the grim reaper standing in their foyer holding a laser measure. Mr. Chang played his part perfectly, nodding politely while Linda complained about the property. "The lighting in this kitchen is just dreadful," she said, gesturing to the pendant lights I had installed with my own hands 3 years ago. "And the flow of this room, it's just so cramped. If we stay here much longer, we'll really need to knock that wall down." I watched Mr. Chang taking mental notes, not for renovations, but for the listing description. My mother didn't realize she was giving a sales tour of a house that didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to me, and for the first time in years, I was going to act like it. As we walked out to his car, Mr. Chang didn't mince words. "The market is hot, Kara. With a price like this, we'll get cash offers by the weekend. We can move fast." I sat in his car and signed the listing agreement. My hand hesitated for a fraction of a second. I remembered painting the guest room a soft sage green, sweating in the summer heat, to plant the little dogwood tree by the mailbox. This house was supposed to be my sanctuary. But as I looked back at the window where Tessa was holding up a bikini for my mother to approve, the nostalgia evaporated. This wasn't just revenge. It was survival. I signed the paper. immediately after I opened my banking app and formally filed the fraud dispute. The bank instantly credited the $13,400 back to my account while they opened the investigation. The financial noose around my neck loosened just enough for me to breathe. The listing went live the following morning, exactly 2 hours after my parents and Tessa boarded their flight to Phoenix. My phone pinged with a group text from them, a selfie from the first-class lounge holding mimosas. "We're off. Don't work too hard, Kara." I stared at their smiling faces, the absolute lack of guilt, and typed back a simple response. "Have fun. Hope it's everything you dreamed of." The silence lasted for about 6 hours. Then the community ambush began. As soon as the for sale sign hit the lawn and the Zillow alert went out, the gossip mill in our small town spun into overdrive. The first call came from my Aunt Sarah. "Kara, your mother called me in tears before they took off," she said, her voice accusing. "She said someone is trying to steal their home." "Is it the bank? Are you going to let your parents be homeless?" Before I could answer, a notification popped up from a woman I'd known since Sunday school. "We heard you threatened your parents," it read. "That you'd rather have money than family. I'm praying for your heart, Kara." I realized then that my parents had preemptively spun a story. They knew I was angry, so they had painted me as the greedy, unstable daughter threatening their security. I felt ambushed all over again, not just by the credit card charge, but by an entire community that only knew the curated saintly version of the Ford family. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the credit card statements on Facebook and burn their reputation to the ground. But I didn't. I chose tools, not tantrums. I drafted a single surgical email and text message to the key relatives and family friends who had reached out. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't call names. I simply listed the facts. I am the sole owner of the house. I have paid the mortgage, taxes, and repairs for 4 years while my parents live there rent-free. Last week, they charged $13,400 to my credit card for a luxury vacation without my permission. I am selling the house to recover my financial stability. I am choosing not to be their safety net anymore. The reaction was mixed. Some relatives went silent, clearly uncomfortable with the ugly truth. Others sent lukewarm hope, "you can work it out" platitudes. But then a ping came through from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Kara, I believe you," she wrote. "They did similar stuff to my mom over a loan years ago. Stay strong." It was a tiny crack in their perfect image, but it was enough. 3 days later, Mr. Chang called. We had multiple offers, including a young couple offering cash for a quick close. They wanted to be in by the end of the month. I looked at the calendar. The closing date would be exactly 1 day before my parents were scheduled to return from Arizona. I accepted the offer. With the sale pending and the closing date set, I made one final arrangement. Using the frequent flyer points that the fraudulent transaction had ironically generated, I booked a solo flight to a national park out west. I needed mountains. I needed distance. On the day of the closing, I sat in the title company's conference room, signing my name over and over. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from Instagram. My mother had posted a photo of the three of them toasting with colorful cocktails on a sun-drenched patio, captioned, "Family is everything." I looked at the photo, then at the check the title agent slid across the table to me. I handed over the keys to the buyer's agent, a heavy metal ring that felt like a grenade I was finally throwing back. While my parents toasted family in the desert, I had quietly sold the life they thought they were entitled to. I was sitting at gate C-14 watching the ground crew load luggage into the belly of a 737 when I made the mistake of turning my phone off airplane mode. I had kept it dark all morning, knowing that today was the day. Based on the flight schedules, my parents and Tessa would have landed 2 hours ago. They would have collected their bags, driven the 40 minutes to the suburbs, and pulled into the driveway right about now. The phone didn't just ring, it convulsed in my hand. Notifications cascaded down the screen in a blur of banners, missed calls, voicemails, text messages, WhatsApp alerts. It was a digital avalanche. My heart hammered against my ribs, a physical recoil that was pure muscle memory. For 30 years, their disapproval had been my command to fix things, but I forced myself to sit still. I didn't answer. Instead, I let the voicemails play out, pressing the phone to my ear like I was listening to the black box recording of a crash I had engineered. I could picture the scene perfectly. They would have dragged their heavy suitcases up the walk, sunburned and exhausted, but riding the high of a vacation they didn't pay for. Dad would have tried his key. It wouldn't turn. He would have jiggled it, cursed, maybe kicked the door. Then the door would open, not to me, cowering and apologetic, but to the new owners. Confused strangers. I imagined the shouting. I imagined the police cruiser rolling up. I imagined the officer checking the deed on his computer and delivering the news that would shatter their reality. The house was sold. The owner is Kara Ford. You have to leave. The first voicemail was from my father. It wasn't the voice of a parent. It was the voice of a tyrant losing control. Kara. This is your father. Call me back right now. This is not funny. There are strangers in our house. They say they bought it. You better fix this immediately, or so help me God. His voice cracked with rage. The background noise filled with the chaotic squawk of a police radio. The next was Linda. She was weeping, that breathless, high-pitched sobbing she used to get her way with customer service agents. How could you do this to us? To your own parents? We're standing on the sidewalk. Kara, the police are telling us to move the car. After all we sacrificed for you, after everything we did. Then Tessa. Her message chilled me the most. You can't just erase us like this, Kara. You threaten their security and then disappear. You're sick. You need help. Mom is terrified. Fix this. As the messages continued to pile up, the threats escalated. They were going to sue me. They were going to tell my boss I was mentally unstable. They were going to tell the church I had stolen their retirement money. They were going to erase me from this family forever. I sat there in the sterile airport light, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. The old instinct to save them flared up hot and urgent. I could call the new owners. I could offer to pay for a hotel. I could transfer the money from the sale back to them. I could fix it. I was the fixer. That was my role. But then I remembered the photo on the wall, the one where I was half cropped out. I remembered my father's voice saying, "What's yours is ours." I remembered the years of paying the mortgage while they bought new furniture I wasn't allowed to sit on. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of jet fuel and stale coffee. They weren't homeless because I sold my house. They were homeless because they had spent an entire lifetime refusing to stand on their own 2 feet. They had cannibalized my future to feed their present, and now that the food source was gone, they were starving. That wasn't my crime. It was their consequence. I didn't call back. From my cramped economy seat as the boarding announcement began, I typed one final surgical text message. I sent it to a group chat with all 3 of them. The house was always mine. You lived there rent-free for years. You used my card without my permission. You ambushed me. You spent decades trying to erase me and my needs. I'm done. Don't contact me again. I hit send. Then with a calm that surprised me, I went down the list. Block contact. Block contact. Block contact. I opened Facebook. Block. Instagram. Block. Email. Block. I watched the signal bars on my phone fade to nothing as the plane accelerated down the runway. For the first time in my life, I was unreachable. Hours later, I was standing on a ridge in a national park, the vast American wilderness stretching out before me in a sea of green pine and gray stone. The wind up there was fierce, whipping my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. It was loud, but it was a clean noise. There were no guilt trips in the wind. There were no demands in the rocks. I felt a profound grief wash over me, heavy and dark. I had effectively orphaned myself. I had burned the bridge and the map back home. But beneath the grief there was something else, a terrifying, beautiful lightness. Up there on that ridge, wind in my face, I realized something. If my parents could erase me from their family, maybe I could erase the version of myself that belonged to them. The doormat. The bank. The ghost. She was gone now, left behind on the sidewalk, with 3 sunburned people who no longer knew where to go. 8 months later, the mountains looked different. They weren't the jagged, desperate peaks I had fled to in Arizona. They were the Rockies framing the skyline of Denver, my new home. I had taken the equity from the house sale, every cent of it, and moved 2 states away. I didn't just change zip codes. I changed the entire ecosystem of my life. I landed a job as a senior project manager at a firm that respected weekends, and I started a small side hustle consulting on budget logistics. But the real work happened in a quiet office on Tuesdays where a therapist helped me learn a new vocabulary. Words like enmeshment, parentification, and boundaries became the bricks I used to build a wall around my sanity. I was rebuilding more than just my bank account. I was building a community. For the first time, I had coworkers who invited me to game nights without expecting me to pay for the pizza. My neighbors here brought me sourdough starter, not guilt trips. And there was Mark, a landscape architect I'd met on a job site. He was kind, patient, and terrifyingly respectful. When he asked me what I wanted for dinner, he actually waited for an answer. He was teaching me that love didn't have to be a transaction, that I didn't have to buy my way into someone's heart. But the old life didn't vanish quietly. Through the digital grapevine, mostly screenshots sent by a distant cousin who had always been the black sheep, I watched the fallout back home. My parents had gone scorched earth. They told anyone who would listen that I had abandoned them, that I was mentally unstable, that I had effectively stolen their home. They even started a GoFundMe titled "Seniors Displaced by Family Tragedy," accompanied by a photo of them looking forlorn in a motel room. It hurt seeing the lies rack up likes from people I'd known my whole life. But then the narrative began to fracture. The GoFundMe stalled out. My cousin sent me a message from my Aunt Linda, a woman who had terrified me as a child. "Tell Kara I get it," she had written. "They borrowed $5,000 from us in '98 and never paid it back. Good for her." A former neighbor messaged me privately. "They told us you forced them to pay the mortgage all those years. We always thought something felt off. Glad you got out." Slowly, the community that had judged me began to see the cracks in the perfect Ford family portrait. The real test came on a rainy Tuesday evening. There was a knock at my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and old panic flared in my chest, the fear that they had found me. I opened the door to find Tessa. She looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her. The polished golden child shine was gone. Her hair was messy, her eyes rimmed with dark circles, her designer coat looking worn. She stood there shivering in the hallway, looking small. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice wasn't demanding. It was defeated. I let her in, but I didn't hug her. I made tea. We sat on opposite ends of my gray sofa. Tessa didn't waste time. She told me they were living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment near the airport. Dad was working part-time security. Mom was greeting at a retail store. But the real news was the dynamic. "They blame you for everything," Tessa whispered, staring into her mug. "Every day. It's Kara's fault we're here. Kara ruined us. But since you're gone, they don't have anyone else to focus on. It's me now. I'm the one who has to listen to the ranting. I'm the one who has to fix the internet and pay for the groceries when they run short. They tried to erase you, Kara. But I see it now. They're trying to erase me." She looked at me, tears spilling over. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I let them treat you like that. I'm sorry I helped them." I listened, feeling a strange mixture of skepticism and pity. I didn't rush to forgive her. I didn't offer to save her. That was the old Kara. "You don't have to sacrifice your whole life to be a good daughter, Tessa," I said softly. "You can leave. You can choose you. They'll scream and they'll threaten, but the threats are just how they keep you small." Tessa wiped her face. Can we be sisters again?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. "We can try," I said. "But I have boundaries now. I'm not the bank. I'm not the fixer. If you want a sister, I'm here. If you want a conduit to them, I'm not." Tessa nodded, understanding the terms. She left an hour later. I didn't know if she would actually break free, but for the first time I realized that the outcome wasn't my responsibility. On the 1-year anniversary of the resort charge, I sat on my balcony. The sun was setting over the Rockies, casting long purple shadows across the city. Down the street, kids were riding bikes, and an American flag fluttered on a neighbor's porch. It was a quiet, ordinary life, the kind I had been told I didn't deserve unless I paid for it. I thought of my parents likely sitting in their small rental still spinning stories, where they were the victims still waiting for the world to reimburse them for their existence. I felt a pang of sorrow, sharp and clean. They had chosen their comfort over their daughter again and again, but beneath the sorrow was a bedrock of resilience. They hadn't erased me. They had only erased the version of me that accepted their terms. People ask if I regretted selling the house, going no contact, letting my parents threaten to erase me from the only family I'd ever known. The truth is that day at 6:17 a.m., I didn't just lose a family, I found a self. And for the first time in my life, standing on my own balcony, paid for with my own peace of mind, that was enough. And with Kara Ford finally choosing herself and stepping into a life that was truly her own, her complicated chapter of reckoning comes to a close. What did you think of the final boundaries she set? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you found this story of betrayal and self-redemption compelling, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.